Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. One of those needs that we have is for energy sources as we add 2 billion new people to the planet. And there's much discussion about fracking and flaring, and we're going to talk about that and how actually these movements and technologies can be used to actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions into the environment, provide alternatives to dirtier fossil fuels, act as bridges into new renewables, and at the same time create new jobs. Have a gentleman who's actually helping to do all that. He's sitting right beside me. His first name is Robert, goes by Rob, then Laer Hartwell. He's the president of Hartwell Capital Consulting. And Rob, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you back with us. And we're going to come up with this first slide, and I'm going to let you talk about what is Hartwell Capital Consulting, and then let's talk about what is the flaring and the fracking.
Sure, Sam. Yeah, I founded Hartwell Capital Consulting back in 2000 after a 13-year career on Capitol Hill. I was the chief of staff to 3 congressmen, worked for another. The genesis of it was actually lobbying. I started out as a lobbyist, as most former Hill staffers do. And, but I've always had a passion for the environment. I've always had a passion for trying to clean up our planet and find economic alternatives that make sense. And that was instilled by my mother, Elizabeth Hartwell.
I was going to say, you have a long history as far as the environment is concerned.
I do.
And a very important one, because even though your mother is no longer here, she's with us in spirit, but had fantastic work. Tell us a little bit about that for the Chesapeake Bay, and then we'll move on.
She fought to preserve, fought many battles for about 30 years to preserve the environment for the protection of the American bald eagle in the nation's capital region along the Potomac River. And the Mason Neck National Wildlife Refuge bears her name. It's named for her now, Elizabeth Hartwell Mason Neck National Wildlife Refuge. And I guess in watching her activities, and she had me tagging along with her everywhere, I learned an awful lot about the environment. I learned about how crucial it is. And then combining that with the business experience, I started to learn on Capitol Hill, and then in the private sector with my company now, we're finding technologies and finding ways to help clean up the environment, preserve our planet, offer sustainability for the future.
Well, looking at this balance between the environment and economic development, I know this is one of the things that you're doing, and also that goes to creating jobs in civil society. But actually, you're looking at the fracking and flaring not as a great negative, as many people are talking about it, particularly in the environmental realm, but the fact that actually it can help to clean up the environment. So what is this? Let's define what's fracking and flaring, and then the technologies that are going to address that.
Well, fracking is really just one methodology of taking carbon out of the ground and forcing steam and pressure, steam under pressure down under the ground, thousands of feet under the ground, and fracturing the layers of shale where the oil and the gas are trapped. And it's actually been going on for many years, but they have learned how to do horizontal drilling now and how to send the steam and the fracking out miles and miles underground. So there's only a small disturbance at the surface, but then underground they're expanding and then pulling up thousands and millions of cubic feet of gas and oil.
Well, the United States has now become, in a sense, the new Saudi Arabia as far as the hydrocarbons are concerned. You know, through these technologies, it's not the fact that it hasn't been there before, it's the fact that now we can get at it through technology. Well, what's the importance of this slide that we have right here?
Well, this was taken.
Tell us the story.
Yeah, well, it's taken from satellite, and the bright lights in the Williston Basin, which is in North Dakota, which is known as the Bakken Fields. Those bright lights are brighter than many of the cities that are in that slide, Minneapolis and Grand Forks and some of the other cities. It's just an enormous amount of $100 million of gas burned off in the Bakken fields every month, directly into the ozone. So that's
unconscionable.
That's a picture of it.
Yeah, and we're seeing that, and this is what we're just actually burning off. We're wasting this natural resource that we have, and even though we say we're the Saudi Arabia of fossil fuels now, that could change very quickly depending on how we keep that going. But this is what this really looks like. What is this really happening here for the uninitiated that's watching this program?
The fracking that they're doing, the burning of waste gases, they're burning off parts of the gases that are not easily, and let me stress that, not easily, but they can be, converted into natural gas that can be sent directly through pipelines or trucked out if necessary into consumers and to industry in this country. Unfortunately, even though the technologies exist to capture this gas and to eliminate it being flared into the atmosphere, there's not deep regulation of this effort, and hundreds of millions of dollars of this gas are being burned into the atmosphere without thought that it can be captured and saved or transported.
Well, we know there's great discussion about, the fracking and the flaring, and we just saw a photograph of this as actual flaring. But when we look at this, we can see it's like almost the entire United States has these vast reserves under it. Tell us a little bit about finding this and then what's happening to extract that.
Well, the United States, as you said a minute ago, is now the #1 country in the world for natural gas reserves. A lot of this has happened just in the last few years through fracking and through finding these deposits. In Texas, the Permian Basin, the Eagle Ford Basin, Eagle Ford on the eastern side, Permian on the western side, for many, many years were known as one of the oil centers of the United States, but they hadn't, the layers of shale that had not been penetrated before, and the new technology being able to pull this gas and oil to the surface greatly expanded. And that's the #1 area for gas production and fracking in the United States. Marcellus, Pennsylvania, of course, was where the first oil well in the United States started. And they've gone back to Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and found all of these deposits where they can pull the oil shale and gas.
As we can see this going on in upstate New York, so it's throughout this whole region. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing. Yeah. But this goes back again to these bright lights. Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about this. Well, and this has reinforced what we've seen before.
Just another scene. The lights on this screen at night from satellite, all the lights in the lower right-hand quadrant are the fracking that's going on, the flare gas that's being burned into the atmosphere every night. And I just came back from overseas to Doha and Abu Dhabi, and I flew over Basra in Iraq, and it was the same thing there. It was just a continuous flight over the Gulf states in the Middle East, and seeing the enormous number of wells that were being flared into the atmosphere over there too. So it's going on all across the world.
Yeah, we understand that. I tell you though, it's just like with everything that's going on in Europe these days, and of course in Southeast Asia, North Asia, where they really have a desperate need for energy as we transition into these renewables, the non-fossil type renewables with solar and hydro and hydrogen and all that. We can't just keep burning these assets and then putting the greenhouse gases into the environment. So looking at that, what are some of the solutions that you've been able to identify through your research, looking at the technologies, but even more than that, the processes to be able to use these gases?
Well, first of all, these gases, as I said earlier, can be captured, can be refined on site in remote locations on portable skids. They can be used for power to continue the fracking process at the site, and the gases that aren't used to create the power then can be transferred in and refined on site into liquid natural gas, into the derivatives that come out, the methane, the ethane, the propane. We had huge propane shortages in the Northeast this year. A lot of this frack gas could have been captured and shipped out to the Northeast to alleviate those problems. And it's not just here, it's across the world. Of course, we know there's some serious problems in Europe with dependency on Russia for most of their gas supply as well. So there's a whole new export market for all of these derivative gases, these waste gases that are currently being flared. across Europe and not only from the United States, but from the Middle East as well.
Well, looking at this chart we have right here, Rob, and this is something that you and I have been talking about. 6-7 years ago, this chart wouldn't even literally exist.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, this is one of the top producers, not only in the United States, but in the world, as far as natural gas. And of course, in many of these cases, these wells, there's actually crude oil there. So it's just a phenomenal change that's going on. And this is United States government records there. But looking at this, we're looking at these various areas. How does this really impact the economy, the local economies, and the creation of new jobs?
We're in an energy revolution in this country, and fracking
Not evolution, but revolution.
Revolution.
Okay,
yes,
got it.
It's been part of this. The number of jobs created, the economic activity, the ability now for the U.S. to be an exporter of natural gas and of liquid natural gas. We've gotten to the point where gas prices are so low, they're having to make other renewables and other technologies that create power more efficient, and they have to compete. And right now, that's very hard to compete against those low natural gas prices. But the jobs, the economy, the number of housing opportunities that they have in Bakken fields in North Dakota and in Pennsylvania. North Dakota has the lowest unemployment rate in the United States, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and that all goes back to what we're looking at right here. This gives us an idea of the complexity of what we're seeing out there. You know, as far as engineers and most people, they look at this and this is a sight of beauty. Others would have a different opinion, this whole thing. But how does this technology fit into actually going down, doing the fracking, bringing it back up? Then what happens to process this gas?
Well, you can, there, as I said, are ways to portably bring in the equipment to process the gas on site, to turn it into natural gas that can be burned on site in a gas turbine to create power. And one of the other things that's being done is the largest problem, environmental problem in Pennsylvania, is because of spilled diesel, according to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. That spilled diesel doesn't have to take place. They can convert any diesel fuels, one of the technologies that we have, LPP, combustion, can convert that diesel fuel into natural gas on site, and thus the 90% reduction that you get in the emissions from that is just a tremendous boon.
Well, the whole thing about this, you know, people are saying, well, we don't want the fracking, we don't want the flared, which we both agree with. But at the same time, people keep then thinking we just keep using diesel. But as you were saying, is that the gains that we're making, you know, for the first time, I guess the last, 2 or 3 years, we've had an actual decrease as far as greenhouse gas emissions into the environment. Well,
you know, we've made tremendous progress in this country on reducing emissions. And, you know, sure, regulations have something to do with that. A lot of it that has happened is that technology has evolved, and the oil companies and the gas companies have developed this technology, understanding they have to do this, and we're becoming more competitive because of it.
Okay, well, thank you, Rob, for being with us. This is Robert Van Laer Hartwell, President, Hartwell Capital Consulting, as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids. One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged. Where teachers have more time to teach. And students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from the United States, looking around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the processes, the products, and the people that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we go to a planet that has 9 billion souls by 2050, how we're going to be able to take care of the food, the fuel, the fiber, also the basic infrastructure that they need. And all of this has got to be driven by some type of energy source. And so we're talking about the notion of fracking and flaring and using and economizing on natural resources, using these as a bridge into renewable energy, which is very important to not only protect the environment, but also increase green jobs and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions into the environment. And the gentleman sitting right beside me is working at this on a day-to-day basis. He's Dr. Leo D. Eskin, who is the president and CEO of LPB Combustion. And then right beside him, a good friend of ours has been on before, Robert Van Laer Hartwell is the president of Hartwell Capital Consulting. So Leo and Rob, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you.
And Leo, since you're right beside me, I guess I can call on you first. But what is it we were seeing behind us right now on this huge screen, and what's the impact to the environment of what we're looking at?
What we're seeing behind us is a night shot of the United States, and you can see in the Bakken Formation there's a great large bit of light there, and that light is not from the people or the electricity, it's primarily from the flaring that's being done in the field. The fracking fields are having to flare a lot of gas because that gas is not available for use in normal combustion equipment. And that's a great loss to the environment because we're burning this gas that could be beneficially used. And our technology is focused on trying to find ways to improve the use of that fuel for electricity generation instead of just pollution.
Well, looking at LPB combustion, what is LPB combustion and what is your role in all this? Because it's not only just the electricity, but also it's trying to capture some of this excess gas as well.
That's correct. LPB Combustion is a company that was spun out of a related company called Combustion Science and Engineering. And Combustion Science and Engineering is a group of combustion engineers and mechanical engineers like myself. And we spent our careers trying to improve the efficiency of combustion equipment and reduce pollution. And what the technology does is it takes liquid fuel and it turns it into a substitute natural gas. So the natural gas that's created from this liquid fuel can be burned in equipment designed for natural gas. You might ask, why is that novel and why is that important? It's novel because for 30 years the combustion community has tried to make new equipment, new burners to burn liquid fuel as a gas. And the reason you want to burn it as a gas is because the pollution is far, far lower than it is with liquid fuel combustion. So we can reduce the pollution by 75%. We can only produce 1/4 of the pollution if we can burn the liquid fuel as a gas.
And that's what we're seeing here as far as the problem, the goal, and the solution.
That's correct. That's what we're seeing there. The left-hand flame there, the orange flame is a normal liquid fuel flame. The blue flame in the middle is a natural gas flame. And the blue flame on the right is a biodiesel flame where we've turned the biodiesel into a substitute natural gas. And an important point here is that that's being burned in equipment designed for natural gas. So the equipment doesn't change and we get to leverage all of that extremely efficient combustion equipment.
I think it's fantastic. And I'm going to go back up to this. Rob, you've been looking for technologies. I know that you're working on Capitol Hill in the United States, also the Middle East and United Kingdom and Australia and Brazil, all these other countries where we're going after the fracking of these new sources of natural gas and also crude oil. And what's the problem with this photograph?
The problem with the photograph is that, again, the flame is burning hydrocarbons that could be captured, could be turned into energy, and or refined into other forms of gases to power equipment or be exported or transported.
So looking at this, we see these little, as I refer to as the dunking machines. You know, these are bringing the oil up out of the ground. This is something you see across the West, of course, now in New York and Pennsylvania and places like that as well. So what are we doing actually, not just to the global environment, what are we doing to the environment in these local communities where we're actually flaring all this instead of trying to capture this gas?
Well, we're really wasting an opportunity, Sam, and I've just been going up to Capitol Hill recently to point this out. We're wasting an opportunity to refine these gases, provide lower prices to consumers, employ more people to harness these the waste gases that are being burned, and we're polluting the environment, which we all end up suffering from with increased lung cancer and increased disease. And I'm not even going to go into climate change. All these emissions go directly up into the atmosphere, and I'm not going to open that debate on this panel.
Well, the whole thing is that, and this is something, Leo, that I know you've been working at this really your entire professional life, and of course
Correct.
Rob's been doing this from the policy and economic development side. But this type of equipment that we're looking at here, it's on this large flatbed trailer, is going out to actually address some of the issues as far as climate change is concerned and putting more greenhouse gases into the environment. So how does LPP combustion address those dual issues? At the same time, you're actually creating, as I understand it, new jobs.
Correct.
While reducing, the loss of this huge amount of income, not only for private companies and the producers as far as the petrochemicals, but also, for the nation itself. So how do you fit into that whole nexus?
Yeah, the way we fit into that nexus is we can modify that gas that's being flared. And the reason many of those gases are being flared is that they're not close enough to natural gas to be able to be used in that gas turbine on the truck that you're seeing there. That's a 5 megawatt gas turbine, can generate 5 megawatts of electricity. But the natural gas for a device like that has to be very close to normal natural gas. So our technology takes what you saw being flared and turns it into natural gas that's close enough to natural gas that it works very well in that type of gas turbine equipment. So now instead of flaring the gas and getting soot and pollution, we get electricity and very, very low emissions. And then the construction of the skid will provide local jobs, as you point out. It will also remove the need to truck in diesel fuel. What they're doing now at the fracking fields is they're trucking in diesel for diesel generators. They're creating a lot of soot and pollution, and that diesel fuel is extremely expensive.
Well, it's extremely expensive, but at the same time, though, it produces a huge amount of hydrocarbons.
Correct.
That goes out, heavy particulate matter that goes in. So looking at this piece of machinery right in front of us, how does it take and use that new fuel that you're producing in order to generate electricity? And why do they need electricity at the production fuels anyway?
They need the electricity in a number of different areas. One, sort of a low-level amount of electricity is needed for the pumps that we saw early on. But when they're doing the drilling, they need much more electricity, on the order of megawatts. So the big diesel generators are brought in for those megawatts of electricity, and you're absolutely right. They create all kinds of very high levels of soot, particulates, and NOx and CO pollution. And we now know that soot, also called black carbon, plays a big role in the warming of the climate.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
Rob, going back, I know that you've been working with LPP combustion for some time now, and actually you've been taking their technology abroad. So what can a Brazil, an India, a China, the United Kingdom, Poland specifically, as far as Eastern European country, how can they use this technology to help them in what they're trying to do to wean themselves from a inconsistent source of natural gas and at the same time improve their own economies?
Well, I think Leo just mentioned the use of diesel fuel. It's a dirty fuel. It's very expensive. Think of the remote islands in the world. The Philippines have the highest electricity costs in the entire world. Most of the Philippines are using diesel generators to generate their electricity, and they turn them off many hours a day, so they're not wasting so much fuel. In Europe, most of Europe is pretty much under the control for its gas supplies from Russia. And Russia dictates the price, where else these European countries, they don't pay the price that Russia's charging, they don't get the fuel that they want. It's a huge international diplomatic tool, so to speak, politely.
Called leverage.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know, Leo and LPP, I've done this too. We've been talking to the embassies, we've been talking to the different European countries, and I've been talking to the Middle Eastern countries about, you have a whole export market in Europe awaiting all this waste gas that you're currently flaring into the air. Why don't you convert it into exportable gas and send it to Europe that wants to get out from underneath the leverage of that one giant supplier that they have right now?
And at the same time, really improve the economy. And I tell you, Leo, this is really, it's a very ubiquitous type of piece of equipment. It goes to something like this. What are we looking at here? How does this actually work?
It's a very straightforward piece of equipment, and it's very typical in the oil and gas industry. All we're doing is heating the liquid fuel and turning it into a gas, and then blending it with nitrogen that we get from the air. So we take air and remove some but not all of the oxygen, which is very easy to do. And then we blend the two together in just the right proportion so that the resulting gas looks just like natural gas. And then that's fed into the gas turbine. So now the gas turbine can run either on natural gas if it's available, or on LPP gas, which is what we call this substitute natural gas. And it gives you a phenomenal fuel arbitrage opportunity. So you can go back and forth and use whatever fuel is available. And this works with a range of liquid fuels through the light alcohols up through biodiesel and diesel fuel. And as Rob was mentioning, in the EU, that fuel arbitrage would be very helpful, because if you have natural gas equipment, you need natural gas or an equivalent, and this would give the fuel arbitrage opportunity with liquid fuels.
I was in a seminar recently with a number of top generals, so they're looking at the military side of this whole thing, and they said if you could increase the supply by 10%, just 10%, they said that could actually reduce the cost to the average citizen maybe as much as 50%, right, because it's now putting leverage on those that are having a monopoly in this whole thing.
Exactly.
But this looks like very simple equipment, so it doesn't look very complex. But Rob, let's finish up in here. Looking at these technologies and the experience you've had with Leo and other companies, what do you see for the next 5, 10, 15 years as far as where we're going to go? And we got about 30 seconds, and that's it.
Well, first of all, I mean, EPA, frankly, is going to come out and regulate flaring and any of the pollution involved with.
So we're getting ahead of the curve.
We're getting ahead of the curve. We're preparing industry, preparing the United States to be able to meet these new regulations that are coming down the pike and probably are necessary, and allowing us to be ready to capture this waste gas that's currently being burned.
That's fantastic. Well, Dr. Leo D. Eskin, thank you for being with us. And Rob Hartwell, thank you for being with us to share. And thank you for being with us, dear viewer, as we talk about how we're going to take care of the world as we create the Emerald Planet.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations as we prepare the world for a population, some say maybe as many as 9 billion souls. And so how are we going to be able to provide the power and the food, the fuel, everything else that they need to have the basic infrastructure to increase the quality of life instead of just existing? And as we know, there are many people on the planet, maybe as much as 60% of the people do not have access to adequate power on any one time. Many major cities, capital cities around the globe, have what they call roving brownouts that may actually be for the major part of the day. So there's just no power to take care of the education, the health care, and the other infrastructure needs of these countries. We have a gentleman who's actually working very hard, has technologies that's already solving some of these issues. He's coming to us by Skype from Atlanta, Georgia. This is Wes Allen Livingston. He's a professional engineer, president of what's called MicroLNG and KiloTherm natural gas processing. And we have a special guest with us, which is Rob Van Laer Hartwell, president of Hartwell Capital Consulting. And Wes and Rob, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Good to be here, thank you.
Well, we have a backdrop of some of your schematics on your equipment, but tell us a little bit about what's MicroLNG and KiloTherm natural gas processing. And then we're going to go back to a slide right now, which is this is what we're trying to avoid, and you're trying to, I shouldn't say trying, you're actually taking care of this.
Absolutely, that's our goal. KiloTherm is a group of engineers. We design equipment to process natural gas from small scale like we would have at the flares to larger scale from a wide range of temperatures, including LNG liquefaction. And we have contract manufacturing relationships set up with several companies to build the equipment that we design, and then we go out and develop projects using that equipment.
Well, looking at the worldwide movement using more and more fracking, and I'll let you define that if you don't mind, Wes, but also at the same time we can see these hydrocarbons, if we can go back to that slide, actually being burned off into the environment. And it's just like taking Japanese yen or British pounds or European currency or US dollars and literally just lighting a match to it. So what are we seeing going up in the air here?
Well, you're absolutely right. Where we see most of the flaring in the United States currently is with associated gas from oil wells. And there are different rules and regulations from state to state, particularly in fast-growing new states such as North Dakota. The production of gas associated with oil production has simply outpaced the development of equipment that's capable of processing it and putting that into a pipeline or doing something useful with it. So really it's the oil industry and the huge profits being made there that are driving the associated gas to the point where it's simply more profitable for these companies to focus their efforts on oil extraction and oil recovery, which is fairly straightforward, and then the percentage of gas that's being flared to them is really sometimes, unfortunately, not worth the energy to recover it.
But looking at the technology we have right here, and of course this is your own technology out of both of your organizations, the MicroLNG and the KiloTherm, but it seems like it's very simple and straightforward to actually to capture this and then put it into a world that actually must have these type of hydrocarbons as we progress towards more solar and wind and hydrogen and other renewables. You just can't do it overnight. You have to have these transition patterns. So how can you take this technology we're looking at right here and provide this bridge, but also be able to put this into the export market?
Absolutely. At Associated Gas wells, our technology will chill the gas stream to separate out heavier hydrocarbons that can be liquid at room temperature and a slight pressure, maybe 250 pounds per square inch. Those liquids include propane, butane, heptane, hexane, and similar molecules that are very valuable in the marketplace. And since they can be transported as liquid, they're easy to move out by truck. We then have remaining gases, including methane and ethane, that can be used for other purposes, potentially on site. But our equipment extracts the most valuable components from all the associated gas and more than pays for itself. It's a very attractive economic proposition to use this equipment.
Well, understand just in North Dakota alone, there's over 100 million US dollars a month that are being flared, which means we'll never have the opportunity of using that or to send it over to Europe or Southeast Asia or into Africa, where there's an absolute need for that kind of technology and at the same time for those products. But looking at the flaring that's going on in a place like North Dakota, what are the state and federal governments doing to ameliorate the situation?
Well, that's a great question. The state has taken an active role while at the same time allowing the industry to grow, which it has done at an amazing pace over the past decade. Recently, the governor put together a task force of industry personnel and academics, and we've been involved in that process to evaluate which technologies are economically viable and which companies should be involved and want to be involved in this process. And several companies have raised their hand, including us, and stepped forward with different technologies and people and processes that can solve this problem. And we're at the point now working with industry, working with the state, so that everybody has a win-win solution and that they don't slow down the oil output, which would be very detrimental to these companies, while at the same time being very conscious of the environmental consequences and benefits of this type of technology.
Well, we have our special guest, Rob Hartwell, sitting right beside me. Rob, why don't you ask the next question?
Well, I was going to ask you, Wes, about why the oil producers aren't currently doing this, but I think you answered that they're not incentivized to do it, and they're not, in often cases, required to do it. But you have other kinds of income streams and ways that you can create economic activity. Is your equipment being manufactured in the United States? Is it going to create jobs in the United States? And the gases that you're capturing can also be used to lower the cost for fleets of vehicles and other items. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, all of our equipment is produced in the United States, 100%, either in Georgia, Mississippi, California, Texas, Ohio, Nebraska, quite a few different sources that we're dealing with, and that's very important to us. The added value that we can extract from these streams, number one is the liquids. That's the propane, butane, and associated type gases that are captured at pressure as liquids. Secondly is the remaining gas can be compressed as CNG, which can be a direct replacement for diesel fuel in certain types of engines or in turbines to produce electricity on site or nearby. And so with those technologies, we can create a very valuable stream that's actually worth quite a bit more than the $100 million you guys have been talking about. There's actually, if you offset the diesel at $4 to $5 a gallon, that value goes up considerably.
Well, looking at that, and that's really a perfect segue, Wes. Thank you for kind of giving us this jumping off point. But, you know, the why and the how and the money issues as far as what's coming out of the work that you're doing, how much can these large trucking companies save by using these new alternative fuels versus using the diesel? And what is the difference between the greenhouse gas emissions from using these alternative fuels, again, looked upon as being a waste, now turning it into a valuable product, versus using conventional diesel?
Great question, and the economics are extremely compelling. A company consuming diesel today can cut their cost basically in half by going to even pipeline natural gas.
Did I hear that 50% reduction?
Yes, that is correct.
That's
yes.
incredible.
And it is incredible, and the numbers are absolutely real, and companies are making those conversions right now. And actually in the Bakken, what you'll find is a lot of pumping and drilling companies have already converted their diesel engines to dual fuel. So at the well, they can sometimes, with a little bit of equipment, use the raw associated gas coming up straight out of the ground with a little bit of cleanup and offset the diesel right there. They see the savings, it's real, and as we move that fuel further upstream, we'll have more trucking companies, large shipping companies, locomotives, that will also start to enjoy these same benefits.
Now, looking at this equipment right now, Wes, what are we looking at, and what's the importance of this? Is this the capture, is this the processing, or is this actually converting it into useful products then can be used in both the transportation and the electricity production industries?
Absolutely. We're not actually converting any molecules into another compound. What we are doing is separating the individual compounds into their constituent bases. So what we can do with pressure and temperature through a refrigeration process is essentially distill out the compounds that we want to use. So what we saw in the previous slide there was a high pressure natural gas compressor that's going to raise the pressure to 1,000 to 2,000 psi. Then the second step would be a deep refrigeration to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit or even colder. And by playing with those two variables, we can extract the gases and the liquids that we want to capture.
Rob, we're running out of time. Won't you ask your last question? And then I have one last question for you, Wes. So thank you for being with us. Rob?
Yeah, Wes, you know, you have a unique financing capability as well that you're offering to your customers in a way to make this much more economically feasible. Can you discuss that?
And you got to be
Absolutely.
quick. We have about 30 seconds.
What we've heard from many producers in North Dakota is they don't want to invest their money in this technology because it's better spent drilling more holes to get oil, and I don't blame them. So we're able to come in with a zero cost option to these producers. We'll pay for the equipment and the installation ourselves, and then take a portion of the new revenue from natural gas liquids and CNG and LNG production, which should be a win-win for everyone.
I tell you, this is absolutely fantastic what you're doing, taking a waste and making it to useful products and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and creating new jobs, Wes. So congratulations on all that. And thank you for being with us. Rob, thank you for joining us as we create the Emerald Planet.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
A lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800-RUNAWAY.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of Emerald Planet and also the Director and host of Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a weekly basis to bring you, as we say, the best of the best, the 1,000 best practices that we're finding and identifying and bringing to you from 144 different countries, looking for the very best technologies, the processes, and the products. Of course, the people that are making a difference as we move towards 2050. And as we go to a planet with 9 billion souls, we need to be as conservative as possible of the natural resources, while at the same time to enhance the quality of living for a planet that's going to be adding 2 billion new people just within the next few years. We have 3 people that are actually working towards this goal, particularly on the energy side. How do we actually increase energy production using the bridges of conserving natural resources as we go to more and more renewables, and at the same time to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but increasing employment opportunities. Coming in by Skype from Atlanta, Georgia is going to be Wes Allen Livingston, professional engineer. He's the president of MicroLNG and KiloTherm natural gas processing. Sitting right beside me is Dr. Leo D. Eskin, who is the president and CEO of LPP Combustion LLC. And then a gentleman who's returning with us, Robert Van Laer Hartwell, who's the president of Hartwell Capital Consulting. So, gentlemen, glad to have all 3 of you with us on the Emerald Planet.
Thank you for the invitation.
Rob, let's kick off with you. Looking at what's going on around the United States in the legislature, as far as Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C., state legislature, and then, of course, overseas in Europe, Latin America, Asia, all these places where this notion of creating more and more natural gas, again, as a bridge towards more renewables. What are you seeing on the landscape? What are politicians thinking about? And then how does that translate into policy as far as where we need to be going as we move through this 21st century?
You know, Sam, everybody seems to be crying for a solution, and they know that there's a problem. But 50 states have regulatory bodies to regulate the production and capture of natural gas and the burning of natural gas, waste gas into the flaring and such. So the United States government, for instance, the Congress hasn't really addressed this issue yet in any concerted way. One thing that happened recently was the Supreme Court had a decision that came out that was almost unanimous, that basically said that the emissions from one state that go across the border in the atmosphere into another state, that is a federally regulated situation, that the states don't necessarily have the rights individually to do that, that the Congress can step in and regulate that. That's going to increase EPA's authority to come in with regulations on the flaring issue that we have around the world and in this country right now. You know, around the world, countries are specifically trying to do something on an individual basis. Some of them view it as a problem. Europe, for instance, is way out in front on environmental regulation. The Middle East, less so. And with the vast deposits of gas and oil that they have in the Middle East. It's not really viewed economically as a key issue yet, and it probably won't be as much as we would think that it should be until they realize that the reserves only have 15 or 20 years to go.
Yeah, and looking at the decrease in, even when you look at Russia and the vast reserves and being a major producer, yet there's a steady decline, almost 4% a year as far as what they're actually producing out of their oil fields, and so that's a real issue. And then when you have expanding populations in the Middle East, they're having to use more and more of their crude oil to produce gasoline and diesel for their own societies. All of a sudden, this whole notion of using this flare gas, not putting it into environment as a waste, it has a real issue. But Leo, you were actually involved in doing this, where you're trying to capture this, convert this into, you know, these byproducts into useful products, both for electricity and transportation. Tell us, how do you see the future as far as the kind of work that someone like Rob is doing to let the policymakers know that they really need to be doing things that's positive and that technology is actually there to do something about it?
What we've learned historically is that the best way to advance these technologies is to put them in the field and demonstrate them. Right? The best way to show somebody the benefits of a new technology is to demonstrate taking the flare gases and creating electricity from them and making all of that pollution go away. It never gets created in the first place. So that's our goal, is to take the LPP equipment with a gas turbine on a skid and go to the fracking fields and generate electricity and show them they can replace their dirty diesel generators where the diesel fuel is costing a lot of money, and they can use this flare gas that's being wasted right now.
Now, going back to your technology, Leo, if you don't mind if I ask a follow-on question. So do you have different size equipment that go out? So if you have some fairly small, you know, wells that are actually producing,
that's correct,
and then versus very large. So how do you determine, you know, what is the appropriate technology depending on the location where it's going to be? And then how do you translate that into a useful technology for the natural resources producers themselves?
You're correct. We have many different sizes, and you can think of the LPP technology as one that's providing a pipeline of gas. And the more gas that's needed, the more electricity that's needed, the more equipment we build. We just put in more vaporizers, and we can generate more gas as appropriate. So anything down from the 30 kilowatt size up through multi-hundreds of megawatts are achievable based on the amount of liquid supply you have in your electrical requirements.
So these are all modular, and then you can connect them together.
Correct.
So in essence, you put them together in your factory, test them,
yep,
they go, you assemble them, test again, and then they go to work.
That's correct. And this whole technology is called a skid-based technology. It's very ubiquitous in the oil and gas industry. They're very used to having fuel forwarding skids and building in a modular way.
So this is something they are familiar with and
absolutely
understand.
Right, and our vendors, our integrators are all U.S. based, you know, in the Houston and the Texas area, so they're very familiar with building this equipment.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wes Livingston's with us by Skype, coming in from Atlanta, and I know that you're actually collaborating with LPP Combustion through your MicroLNG and also this KiloTherm natural gas processing. Tell us a little bit more about your technology, how it gets out there, and how you're collaborating with LPP, and you're actually complementing each other as far as both the domestic and the international markets.
Absolutely, yeah. The LPP equipment can produce power which is required on site at the producing wells, or for the wells that are new, that are being drilled and fracked, which requires high pressure pumping and other large uses of energy. The LPP system can use well gas directly at the well, or it can use high BTU liquids or compressed well gas that are sent out within maybe 50 to 100 miles from a producing well. So it gives the producer a lot of options to replace their diesel fuel with a much lower cost fuel, almost a free fuel in some cases.
Yeah, well, looking at that, and I know that you've really been working very diligently as far as creating new technologies that's amenable to the needs, you know, out in the field itself. But at the same time, you're providing financing And this is something that's rare in the industry, where you have the technology, it's advancing, but at the same time you're providing the financing. Tell us about this package, and why did you decide to provide the financing, and how does that actually help the hydrocarbon producers in the field?
Absolutely. With this technology and equipment, we found a little bit of difficulty getting in with the customers because they're very busy, they're short-staffed, the low unemployment in North Dakota, those kind of things. They simply don't have the people to devote to anything new. But the value that we create and LPP Combustion creates is so significant that we have very rapid return on investment, and we have obtained financing for our own equipment for the new value that we create through the liquids, the gas, and the electricity production, that will finance our own equipment in the United States or really anywhere in the world that's a friendly American country.
Well, Rob, looking at what's going on, I know that there's great pressure in Europe, particularly at this time, and even in Southeast Asia and those areas, because people are actually desperate to have energy because the populations continue to expand in these many areas, not so much in Europe, but definitely in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Great pressure there as far as providing energy, you know, to expand those economies. They have a very young population, demand for more and more jobs. So the technologies that you've been able to identify in your long years of history working with governments, both domestic and international, what can you tell the Europeans, the Brazilians, the Australians even, and the Chinese, Indians, and others about how they need to really think about this, and that this is the new wave as we go through the 21st century?
Well, I think we can tell them that the technologies exist, Sam, to eliminate so much waste that's going on in these countries, and that there are flexible new technologies that can allow them to use previously burned off and wasted fuels, wasted and higher cost diesel fuel, that they don't have to use these higher cost technologies and these fuels that also pollute the atmosphere. That they're new technologies that make economic sense, that will improve the environment, and it's just getting the word out, and that's the difficult thing to all of these different countries. It's getting the word out to policymakers and to experts in the field and across the planet. That is the difficult thing.
So it's awareness and education. We only have less than a minute. Leo, what do you see? 30 seconds for you, 30 seconds for Wes. What do you see for the growth of LPP?
We see LPP growing both within the oil fields and also within the renewable space. These renewable liquid fuels, ethanol and biodiesel, are highly polluting, but they don't put out any CO2. We make the other pollutants go away. They're never created, and we think that's very beneficial in the renewable space to back up wind and solar power with gas turbines.
Fantastic. Wes, we've got less than 30 seconds. Where are you going as far as your micro LNG?
Absolutely. MicroLNG allows us to bring small-scale liquefaction to remote countries that are producers, such as Indonesia, parts of Russia that are stranded from their pipeline, or renewable natural gas from landfills and anaerobic digesters in European countries. We can go in and produce this fuel at very low cost and provide a clean alternative to diesel.
Well, thank you for being with us, and Leo, thank you for joining us. Fast and the Furious, right? Rob, thank you for assembling this outstanding group that we have. Wes, for joining us from Atlanta, Georgia. And thank you, viewers, for being with us as we talk about the important issues as we create the Emerald Planet.